us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
WESN.
Another couple lost their lives in a road accident this past weekend. The young child in this case survived, but I believe is critically injured. Onlookers insist that it was the result of a bad drive. It's one of those things where, I'll just say it like this, at the end of the day, look, I wasn't a victim of a bad drive this morning, but I saw two incidents that could have caused accidents with other drivers. One of them, it was just cutting in front of someone into the next lane and like they didn't notice, wasn't so bad. The other one was cutting across traffic when the light turned green in a very unusual way that potentially could have gotten somebody in trouble. And the reason why I bring that up is basically to say, look, I think all too often we make the assumption that all the other drivers are going to be normal and slow and predictable and we could just do the aggressive drive and get away with it. The problem is, I wonder to what extent, when we drive a little too fast, when we already are putting ourselves in the envelope of risk, then you get somebody to give you a bad drive, to turn when it was not expected to turn, to swerve when they weren't expecting to swerve, to cut you off, or to do anything. Actually, it was three. I saw another car, almost like it wanted to cut off a van already turning into the lane. I couldn't understand it. It wasn't like if you were actually going to be ahead of the car turning in. But anyway, that's besides the point. It's almost like if we assume everybody else is going to drive safe so we could drive risky. And then, unfortunately, sometimes two people decide to take a little bit of risk at the same time and you get what you get. And this is where I'll continue to caution people, slow down. How fast do you have to drive? I understand when you're on the highway. But even then, to some extent, if there's a car coming close to me, next to me, if I'm overtaking a car, then you're on a heightened sense of, all right, what's going on? Be careful. If necessary, I'll slow down. I'll back off, let you go. I'm not that old, but I'm old enough where I don't want to take no chances. Even if you survive the inconvenience and the potential risk of injury that has further long-term implications depending how bad it is. I don't want to go through all of that. I want to roll that dice. And I think too many drivers in TNT, they don't understand that they're rolling that dice. And unfortunately, the lucky ones live and are only maimed and are only incapacitated and potentially, left somewhat disabled. And the very lucky ones come out unscathed. But how many people don't get to that result? Then, of course, I did see at least one version of the social media video that I guess went viral. A young man in a house was basically beating on the woman, telling her to put on her clothes and let's go. I'm not entirely sure what the context was. It's one of those things where, well, social media was not necessarily fully on the side of the young lady. One statement I think sums it up best. And if anyone intervened, the same girl will say, leave my man alone. And then people wonder why everyone has refused to help. Makes you wonder if they like the beatings and abuse. And while we don't know what the context was in this case, it could be wrong. It could be completely wrong. But it's pervasive. That sentiment is one of those things where we hesitate to get involved in domestic situations, but because of that, they do, when they escalate, we're not ready for it. We're ill-prepared, we're out of position, and we generally want to kind of look away and not be involved, right? Because it's not our business. And then, unfortunately, things go too far. Bad things, permanent things happen. The problem is, of course, the people involved are situations that don't go to the permanent finality that it sometimes ends up being, fails to understand the concerns of the public, of society, of the authorities, that we don't know your situation is not going to get there. And to some extent, one could argue, nobody knows when their situation will get there, however bad it might be. I guess part of it makes me wonder exactly what are we doing to educate our young people socially? And granted, yes, I'm not going to advocate and say we need to take a page out of the North American playbook when it comes to certain social ideologies. But the basic premise of nonviolence somehow gets lost on a society where there are some women, and I have heard this and I will never understand it. There are some women that say, if you don't beat me, you don't love me. I've been told that by multiple people. I don't personally get it, but The thing is, the fact that that exists, I can't just ignore it and say it doesn't make sense and basically put down whoever might actually believe that. Rather, it's to point out the fact that, look, how we view domestic situations in this country is very unhealthy from multiple angles. And to what extent is our education system and our community support system, extended family system, the village, all of the mentors, big brothers, uncles, aunts, not really contributing to the knowledge base of our youths to say, hey, why do we have to do things like this? Again, maybe this young lady might have antagonized the man and then he took it a step too far after the fact. Doesn't make him right. But it could be an indicator that there were specifics to the situation that, we don't necessarily know about. All right, fine. But still, the only way to really guard against things like this, the police are not going to be able to stop this. We need to understand that. At best, you could, after the fact, make arrests. But as pointed out, a lot of the times the victims don't want to press charges, right? So, one of the comments said, hope the authorities get involved with or without her consent. Maybe because of the video recording, in this case, that's possible. Maybe. I don't know the law. That's the other thing. The laws need to be updated. But ultimately, you can't police the behavior of every man and woman because, again, some women have the philosophy, if you don't beat me, you don't love me. We can't police everybody. So what does that mean? It means we have to do a better job educating ourselves, our upcoming generations. I'm not saying that you're going to eliminate violence 100%. It's just that it seems too regularized. Despite the outcry, despite the fact that people look at it and are appalled, do we honestly think that this is an exception, an exceptional situation, a rare situation that only happens few and far between, if ever at all? Nah, this is probably more common than we like to think. Speaking about crime, that is too common, even though there only been a couple of situations, and I'll more or less wrap up with this. There was a robbery at the airport. At the airport. What should be one of the most secure locations in all of Trinidad and Tobago, our international airport. There was a robbery at one of the fast food outlets, which part of me is quite surprised because there are multiple other fast food outlets around that one. And I don't know if it was because the criminals, they kind of knew what they were doing in the sense of, this is how we evade airport security. I mean, to some extent, I think it goes so far as to say they are, I'm not too sure if airport security is similar to port police and what powers of arrest or law enforcement powers that they do have. I do remember, I have seen one in Tobago go on a power trip for no reason, but that's a whole other story. They robbed, they went into the airport. They didn't just rob somebody on the outside. This is one of the eateries within the main building, not too far from the international arrivals, opposite to the departure terminal. So of course now, there's going to be more security at the airport again. 2 people, one armed with a gun. Somebody took, I understand, yes, you have metal detectors, not at the door of the airport, but before the gates, before the departure lounge. But still, it's kind of crazy to me that someone was able to wield a gun within the airport. So, and this comes after, of course, there was a murder not too far outside of the airport. And it's almost like if the criminals, you know, yes, I wouldn't say that they were just probing or experimenting, but once you get the results and a precedent that said, hey, we could take a man out right outside the airport. You see any security around? We could probably go in the airport. What comes next? Because it implies vulnerabilities that, let's just say, I dare not speak of on live television and put out there into the ether because I'm not about to give anybody bad ideas. But there was just a murder. One would think, at the very least, we would look at our security systems of the airport and maybe make adjustments long term. Not just do the short term dog and pony show, hey, let's put out some more cops, and you all just stand around there for a while and look, let your presence be felt, be seen, but potentially not heard, and affect nothing. Because then eventually you'll all be pulled from that duty, and then we'll go back to business as usual. And it's almost like if, you know, fingers crossed, the criminals don't figure it out. The whole point of criminality is to exploit vulnerabilities in the system, to exploit vulnerabilities in society. So you can investigate and arrest the individuals in this robbery, and that's the other thing. One would have thought that within the airport, listen, a CCTV system is very expensive if you want to go and cover all the nation's roadways and all the street corners. All right, I understand that. This is the airport. Do we not have CCTV footage to record, I don't know, the license plate of the car that they came in? Potentially, hopefully it's high definition enough to get 1 or 2 of their faces. This is not rocket science, right? And one of the things, yes, you cannot literally have 2 armed police at every door at every window and at every hallway of the airport. All right, fine. Although one could argue there should still at least be maybe a couple of police at the airport, but maybe I'm wrong. One of the things that you secure any location with, you don't have enough armed security or police officers, cameras. Because when crimes are committed in those areas, yes, they won't stop the crime, but eventually as you catch people more and more, they get the message, hey, let's not go there and do this. But I don't know, they could catch the people, but unless they're kind of proven, hey, committing crime at the airport is a bad idea, you could do whatever extrajudicial methods you want to do to catch these crooks. The cat is out of the bag at this point. At this point. There are certain areas where you're paid to be vigilant. And you hope that you never have to actually do your job. But there should be a guy in a room monitoring the situation through CCTV cameras. And then when they see something funny going on, he alerts security and they respond, because this is the airport. This is one of those areas where we cannot afford funny business to happen. Minister of Homeland Security said this could never happen again. Right. To some extent, that is what I want to hear. We need to actually see that happen. What is it about the security arrangements at the airport that are not enough? The acting commissioner of police is saying that the suspects are monitoring police patrols. All right, okay. This happened just after patrol left. Well, then dare I say, what are the long-term security plans for the airport? Just having a patrol come by every now and then, that ain't enough. I mean, think about it. A primary school student will probably come up with the tactic of, let's just wait for that patrol to drive away. We ain't even trying hard here, if that's all it takes. Maybe then the tactic of sending a patrol every now and then ain't good enough. It's safe to go to the airport. The presence of the police is there. All right, long term, you're 0 for 2. Similarly, the acting commissioner of police did say that there are increasing measures like auditing and stronger systems to prevent the number of bullets with police markings being found at crime scenes. You see, to some extent, when the Minister of Homeland Security says it will never happen again, you kind of have to say that. You can't say, well, we hope it never happens again. You kind of have to say that it'll never happen again. You can't actually guarantee, you can't bet, on the fact that it will never happen again. But you have to show some sort of leadership on these sides this to say it'll never happen again. I don't understand why with certain things in the police force, once again, police leadership is kind of saying, well, we hope. When it is time to give decisive statements, they don't. When it's time to not give decisive statements, they do. And I don't understand it. It's almost like if they don't fully grasp what it takes to communicate to the public. Because we don't want to hear that hopefully there'll be less police ammunition used in crime. Think about that for a second. Think about how low the bar is set, where we're saying, well, we'll do auditing and we'll have stronger systems. Leading to a reduction. It's supposed to be 0. You can't reduce crime to 0, but police ammunition in the use of crime is supposed to be 0. It's just one of those things. How are we supposed to have any kind of confidence that you could secure the airport, that you could actually maintain a reduction in the murder rate, that you could do all the things that you're supposed to do, if you can't even control your own ammunition from not being found at crime scenes? Because at that point, the TTPS is not just not part of the solution. They are actively, somebody in there is actively contributing to the problem. And we're not talking about some corruption to allow a little low-level drug pusher or some parking tickets or some low-level corruption by some low-level functionary in an office go through. We're talking about bullets found in crime scenes, which means that potentially the TTPS, there's elements in there that is actively part of the problem with regards to the violence and murder rate. Think about that. Some things cannot be compromised, including one's sovereignty. We'll get to that and more after this. Stay tuned. This is Document on WSN Show. Michael Small. We'll be right back after this.
Struggling with heart health or frequent migraines? Discover the simple steps to reclaim your energy and vitality.
We're diving into a topic that affects about 422 million people around the world: diabetes.
Tune into Wellness Unlocked, the series that delivers expert advice, practical tips, and inspiring stories to help you take control of your health and well-being. Your health matters. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and take the first step toward better health.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide: Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
All right, before we get into the topic, we do have a comment. I'll respond to comment now. Morning. By the way, why don't you say good morning at the opening of your show? Well, we do repeat at night to some extent. Also, I like to just get into some of the opening dialogue straight. It's just how the conversation flows at this point. It could probably change in the future. But the real meat of the comment is there are 7 public exits at the airport. Why can we have security at these points? At least until midnight, 18 hours. Here's the thing. I think it should be 24 hours, first of all. Now, I don't know if you're going to have security at all of the public exits. Not all of them are so far apart that one person, one patrol can't realistically be reasonably close enough to respond to the other. There's one very close to the Tobago departures desk, to the main one at the front and center, and so on and so on. You don't necessarily need 7 police units. You maybe 3, maybe 2. But the key point is you should have camera coverage, in part to record everything that goes on in the airport. That way, you have evidence, including, let's just say, you are police to confront someone doing whatever it is. Part of the CCTV coverage would then be to provide evidence to protect both the police, depending on this is what really happened, this is why we legitimately used force in this situation or did not use force in that situation, but also to protect the public, because then the police would know they're being recorded, the public knows they're being recorded. If anything funny happens with the interaction with the police, let's just say it's not necessarily the Joe public at fault, then that will also provide them with some cover. But it also provides a record for any crimes going on, if just in case it slips through. But I understand the point where they probably should have a more visible presence of security than what they have. Again, about 2 to 3, maybe 4, but probably 2 to 3, right? So that you cover the middle and then to some extent the ends. And depending if there's anything that's happening in between those 3 points, they could converge. But also they probably should be, I think there's security at the gates of the parking lots, but they probably should be security out on the roadways, which usually there are airport police or airport security. At least in Crown Point, there's all the time to annoy people trying to pick up people. But in Piarco, there should be people to help direct the flow of traffic, but also, I guess, to monitor this sort of thing. Are they armed or not? I think they should be armed, but I could be wrong. This is the airport after all. Anyway, this is besides the point. Back to the main topic of today, and it's made headline news on one of the daily papers, if not more than one. And this is, of course, the whole situation between Trinidad and Venezuela. And I'm going to say this up front, and I'm probably going to be redundant in my commentary on this. But I agree with anyone that wants to criticize the Prime Minister in the sense that our Coast Guard does not have the ability to really inflict deadly force against most examples of Venezuelan ships that might end up, that is official ships, that might end up in Trinbagonian waters, right? Or we don't have that kind of capacity in our defense force. It makes you wonder, what's the point of the defense force? Now, granted, these kinds of things require something called budget allocations, which we seemingly don't really spend money on. But more on that in a bit. Now, first of all, our government, apparently they're having high-level meetings with regards to how to respond to this situation. So the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I don't think have really commented on the matter. And the Prime Minister also has, I don't think has commented any more on the matter after initial statements, which on Thursday, which the basic principle of which I don't disagree with, and I still don't. The specifics with regards to the gun talk, maybe she should have refrained from that. And if anyone wants to say she should have framed it better, I'll agree with that. But I'm getting frustrated by people that are operating under a very naive assumption that I don't see how in 2025 you're that politically naive to assume that the government of Venezuela not only was the result of free and fair democratic elections, and thus they're just like anyone else in the Western world, and are peace-loving people, and are reasonable people, and are legitimate people, who have legitimate concerns over a situation that was legitimate. Therein lies the problem. There's a lot of stretching with regards to assumptions that a lot of commentators, politicians, academics are making that makes me wonder, you all think this is a dispute between Barbados and Trinidad or what? I don't understand. Or this is autonomy talks between Trinidad and Tobago? Or this is something internal to the Caribbean region, to CARICOM? These are two little islands having a little argument or something? And at the end of the day, cooler heads will prevail? It's almost like if all of the context of the last couple of years of what we've seen with regards to international relations, both external to the region and as well as internal to the immediate vicinity of the situation, was not factored in at all. It's almost like if the international, the internal political situation of Venezuela was not factored in at all. It's almost like if there are people with agendas in this situation. They're picking sides, or they want to champion their political ideology potentially at the risk of being wrong practically. Because, first of all, let's go with Venezuela. The government of Nicolas Maduro, president of Venezuela, one of the things that came out, I believe, on Friday was that the headline is Venezuela says Kamala's reaction to terrorist claims suspicious. Right? Now, this is not clear to me, but it seems as though claims were made on a minister's program or broadcast that they got certain nationals, including a Trinidadian national. I don't know if we were able to track down the name. I think the ministry, National Security Ministries, are looking into our criminal records to see who this individual is. But Venezuela is doubling on the claim that they have captured criminals of Trinidadian origin who have confessed their plans, statements that have been duly supported with compelling evidence presented by the competent authorities. And as pointed out by one Venezuelan social media commentator, they parade chicken thieves, but who are these people that they're talking about? We don't know. Nobody knows, right? The appropriate thing to do in the face of this serious situation is to offer cooperation and willingness to clarify the facts, right? Not engage in geopolitical games that are alien to the interests of our peoples. And one of the things is it's almost like if they were surprised. The Venezuelan government, well, they say it's suspicious. I don't know why. Because basically what they're saying is, right, on June 6th, the Venezuelan government said it was surprised by the response from Passar Bissessar to a legitimate complaint by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. How is it legitimate? You just said a thing. Okay, I have a legitimate complaint. You're full of hot air. I provide no evidence of that. Or let's just say Venezuela is trying to destabilize Trinidad and Tobago. We caught Venezuelans coming over the border. And so what? Venezuelans come over the border all the time. I have no evidence to that claim. Venezuela has not, as far as I'm aware, shown us anything. To the point where their own people, let's understand this very clearly. This is not just Trinidadians who are saying, well, where's the evidence? Venezuelans are saying, where's the evidence? And the fact that Venezuela was surprised, it makes me wonder if this whole dog and pony show wasn't even meant for us. It was meant for America. It was meant for Colombia. It was even meant for us. It was almost like they weren't prepared to indirectly accuse a nation of being part of a terrorist plot. And yet, because the accusation was nonsense. And that's why they're surprised. And the thing is, again, by their statement, their claim is legitimate. All right, prove it. The appropriate thing to do in the face of a serious situation is to offer cooperation and willingness to clarify the facts. And here's the thing, and again, this is where I think a lot of the people who I will be talking about just now are painfully naive. Where's Venezuela's diplomatic efforts in this whole thing? Some people say that the Prime Minister made a diplomatic faux pas. I would argue, yes, the gun talk could have been a bit more serious and less informal. Although to some extent that was still formal language, right? But maybe a bit more official and less emotional. Maybe that's a better way to put it. But where does anyone look at how Venezuela handled the situation? Yeah, you're making accusations of several nationalities. You're not providing any evidence. And then we're just supposed to take it. In the context of the same nation in question, potentially looking to go on an international adventure of land grabbing to our neighbor in the south. And we're not a country that's far removed from that situation. We're right next to it, mind you. The Guyanese waters that are right next to us, that water Venezuela is distributing is theirs. And they have been saber rattling. But now all of a sudden, our sovereignty being protected, now we can't do that. No, we have no right to do that. Because Nicolas Maduro, he's a good boy. He's a good boy. He never do nobody nothing. No. No. His government is a good government, right? Now, oh boy, where do I start? Where do I start? All right, so first, I'll start with the Minister of Public Utilities. He, we will not be bullied, and strong language, and blah, 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 blah. For 10 years, the PNM pussyfooted around the President of Venezuela and the issues that surround Venezuela as it related to the hydrocarbon sector and the relationship that TNT has with Venezuela, but also the relationship with one of our major trading partners the U.S. has with Venezuela. Here's the thing, and again, let me remind you, it's not just a Donald Trump thing. Even the Biden administration was basically saying, them elections not free and fair. So, to some extent, I could appreciate what the minister is saying, because Stuart Young was really trying to brown-nose Maduro for the Trandon deal, despite the fact that what he really needed to do was to get OFAC to continue the license. But hey, no one ever accused Stuart Young of having the political intelligence that he needed in the moment when he became prime minister. Let's just say it that way. Here's the thing though. One thing that Minister Padrat said was he was speaking on behalf of all 26 members on the UNC bench and the 2 members of the TPP. Now, I don't know if they spoke to the TPP formally or not, but it's just one of those things where you got to be careful when you're speaking for somebody. Because this is that serious. Because it doesn't matter in principle how right you are, you still have to be very careful with how you communicate. This is a very sensitive situation. And I could appreciate people's concern about not wanting to escalate the situation unnecessarily. It's just that I think we are making a very bad assumption to say that we will determine whether the situation escalates or not. Let's not forget this Essequibo question, and now there's a Colombia situation and an American situation, and we were technically roped in by the Venezuelans. We didn't include ourselves. We didn't macro the scene. Let's take one of the next comments there. The PM was being bold, not necessarily realistic. I think Maduro got the message. And this is the thing. Ultimately, and Ashraf and I said this, it wasn't actually about committing violence in order to prove our point. It was to, via communication, sometimes harsh diplomatic messages are forms of diplomacy. It's to basically say, look, don't include us in your games. We're not the previous administration. And I could appreciate that. Again, like the commenter said, don't think that the deadly use of force is realistic, but hey, we had the SOFA, we had the exercise, trade winds happened not too long ago. Let's go on to the next comment. I smell a rat. The PNM wringing their hands, hoping Maduro will fire a bullet or two to destabilize the UNC. I don't know if I'll go that far, but I will say this. Stuart Young is one of the politicians who's commented on the situation, so let's go to him. Where's his comments now? There's so many people that weighed in on this situation. Government must act responsibly on TNT-Venezuela relations. The height of responsibility and arguably borderline insanity for a government led by none other than the Prime Minister to declare a use of deadly force policy on any identified vessel entering Trinidad and Tobago's waters from Venezuela. Now, he has a good point. As has happened on many occasions in the past, our radar system may fail to pick up marine vessels entering or leaving our waters. This is nothing new. Yes, thank you for admitting the inability of your administration and the administration you are part of to do anything to secure borders. Something that we knew based on results, but now we know one of the causes. But it is pertinent. It's a pertinent point. So take the cynicism of the past out of it. It's a permanent point to say, and I said this last week, I do think something happened. I think there might have been a smuggling thing, and maybe they tortured somebody to admit something, or they didn't even torture him. They got some smugglers, there might be international people, including one of our own, potentially, right? Who knows? Maybe it was some CIA people looking to just get some agents in Venezuela through some unconventional means. I don't know, but that's usually not how they would work. And I don't know why they would include a Ukrainian. But now Venezuela could say whatever they want to say. We don't even have like a video confession. But the point is, Georgia is saying, yes, there could have been a boat. There could have been an incident. I don't believe it's the incident that it is what the Venezuelans are describing, but it could have been a thing. And they're either overreacting to the thing or kind of making it up as they go along to suit their political agenda. And again, so to now pretend that you could conclusively determine whether a vessel less TNT destined for Venezuela with personnel on board is simply not true. That's nice, but it's almost like why do we have to worry about a burden of proof and we can't demand the same from the other side? You ever notice in the Ukraine-Russia war when Putin is like, we'll use nuclear weapons, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, Putin might use nuclear weapons. And nobody thought, why is it that we're only worried about them using nuclear weapons? And it's almost like if we can see the fact that the Western world will never retaliate with nuclear weapons, so it's mutual assured destruction, so he's just bluffing. Technically speaking, many of Putin's red lines have been crossed. He hasn't gone to the point of no return yet because he knows if he does that, then the world will turn up against him at best, or he will be nuked in response at worst. Why are these threats and expectations always one-sided? You know, in regards to Ukraine, it's like the Western world can't give Ukraine bombs. We're shelling the hell out of the Ukrainians, but how dare you give them bombs? We will nuke everybody. And in this situation, it is, we should investigate things and be reasonable. But Venezuela can make unsubstantiated claims, and we have to respect that somehow. We have to respect that illegitimate government. Oh, and let me just wrap this part up by saying, by the way, you lost. So 2 months out, I don't want to hear from the losers, because Dr. Keith Rowley also spoke on something. Not just losers, but the Venezuelan appeasers. The people whose political agenda included wanting to work with Venezuela. I don't necessarily agree with the comment that implies that the PNM has some grand conspiracy to make use of this situation to harm the current administration, but they had an agenda with Venezuela. It's almost like if Stuart Young doesn't understand. Maduro is not an oil executive. He's not a peer. As much as he tried to say so on the campaign trail, as much as he tried to say how legitimate the Maduro government was, even the Biden administration was going to admit that, buddy. So I wonder if he would answer the question, just who was he going to brown nose to more moving forward if he won and Biden won? Because it's a convenient situation that Biden lost. He didn't need to worry about having to brown nose him again. And he could be combative against Trump if that's the political stance he wants to take. But let's just say Biden won and he won. Would he have brown nose more to Maduro or more to Biden? I don't know. Speaking about political conspiracy theories, the St. Vincent President Ralph Gonsalves, again, in light of an incident with another CARICOM member, not St. Vincent and the Grenadines, having another incident between a CARICOM member and Venezuela, President Gonsalves wants to be the voice of reason. That's nice. And again, it's the context of the situation. This whole thing with Essequibo is something that I honestly believe CARICOM should stand behind one of its member states, Guyana, and support it as much as possible. Because if it could happen to Guyana, who's next on the chopping block, I wonder? We have seen this behavior locally and internationally. You give them an inch, they take a mile. Again, why are we so painfully naive to say, oh, Maduro, he's a reasonable fellow. He's a reasonable fellow. Yes. Oh, wait, he used the courts to bar the opposition leader from participating in the election? Well, obviously, she did something wrong. Has to be her fault. Can't be our boy, Nicolas Maduro. And that's essentially what it sounds like to me with some of these speakers. Because here comes the president of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Ralph Gonsalves, and he's basically saying, as far as practicable, we do not incline the situation with excessive rhetoric. We just take our patients into account, and whatever is the problem, we solve them maturely between two neighbors. Again, I don't understand, why is it when Venezuela just makes some incendiary claim? Because internationally, when you say that terrorists came from another country and includes nationals of that country, that is an incendiary claim. As was pointed out by somebody, then you're starting to label us as terrorists. That's where it goes if you don't head that off of the pass. All of a sudden, Trinidad and Tobago is a country of terrorists. It's a nation of terrorists. Then Venezuela calls us a nation of terrorists and decides to use their national security forces to deal with the terrorism threat in TNT. Similar to how the Russians decided to deal with the Nazi threat, quote unquote, in Ukraine. All them Nazis in Ukraine, all of them. All 0 of them. So why isn't it that the president of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where was he to call on Nicolas Maduro to refrain from making incendiary claims of a terrorist plot, including other nations, without providing the world with evidence? Or maybe it has something to do with Petrocaribe. I don't know. I don't know if Petrocaribe or something similar is part of his agenda. Because I did find that the situation with Essequibo, at times, he seemed to be quite neutral to the point of bias. Let's put it that way. Okay, we're going on way too long. So a couple other things came up. First, Gary Griffith, he had some good points to make similarly on practical levels. Literally, we're outgunned, which is why the whole deadly force threat probably was not the best one to make. It does send a signal to the Maduro regime, but probably it's not a practical one. Now, to some extent, no one ever accused the Venezuelan government of being intelligent, but that's besides the point. But having realistic expectations of our wholly under-equipped defense force for the mission, we have to have that, right? I'll give him that. Again, I don't necessarily see the whole point where we have to back down and kind of hope, play possum and hope diplomacy makes it go away. Why is it going to go away? To be fair, to some extent, Maduro is a dictator, therefore he's a bully. You don't just try to negotiate with bullies. Did you see how that worked for Europe and Russia? Angela Merkel basically pointed it out, right? The gas deal she made with Russia was in part meant to keep the peace with Moscow. You see how that worked? It worked well, didn't it? Yeah, they kept Russia from looking to go on any sort of aventurism with trade and diplomatic engagement. Worked out so well for the academics. I'll mention a couple of them. Academics like Dr. Indira Rampasad and Dr. Vishnu Raghunath. Dr. Rampasad points out the support of countries such as China and Russia also fueling Maduro's confidence. Maduro's on a rampage. He's on a frolic of his own. He believes that he has the support of some big powers. Well, if that is to be true, because this is also, I believe, one of the speakers who was saying we need to be more diplomatic and we need to apologize for meeting nonsense with nonsense. Or I wouldn't even say nonsense. The Prime Minister was having aggressive talk to an incendiary message with an incendiary message. So exactly. By this logic here, Maduro is on a rampage. He's on a frolic on his own. Yeah, diplomacy usually is not going to stop these things. Diplomacy backed up with decisive action, with a stand, with international defense treaties. That might stop these things. There's one last, I won't get into Professor Raghunath's mentions. There's one last academic that I want to point out. Professor Andy Knight. Instead of making bellicose statements and threats, I would encourage the PM to consider offering intelligence and defense collaboration with Venezuela or working with CARICOM impacts to gather intelligence before reacting. Here's the thing. I understand that. He's not wrong when he says Trinidad and Tobago doesn't have the military capability to back up the kind of threats the PM has made. Right? He's not wrong. It's just that, again, collaboration with Venezuela, when it's already threatened a CARICOM member, when it has ties to a nation that has already shown, proven, let's go on some military adventurism. For all we know, this could have been the start of a false flag operation where they say, CARICOM is corrupt and in the hands of the American pockets, and we need to deal with the terrorism against us done through them by America. Because, again, when he calls for collaboration with Venezuela to deal with this issue, because he assumes that an issue is there, because we'll take whatever Venezuela says at face value, for whatever reason, I have no idea, because Maduro will never lie. No! Don't mind the fact that his own people called him out on it last week, as in his own citizens. That's just weird. Who are we to judge their president? Why are we assuming he's going to be reasonable? I don't understand. You can criticize the Prime Minister fairly for things that she said. I've pointed that out. Guy Griffith has pointed out practical reasoning. Stuart Young has pointed out practical reasoning. Those things are not wrong. Annie Knight has pointed out practical reasoning. Those things are not wrong. But again, this whole thing about, oh no, we need to collaborate with Venezuela and be diplomatic with Venezuela and mea culpa with Venezuela and hold their hands and assume that if we do these straightforward, basic things, that Venezuela will respond as we expect them to respond because they have only shown that they are reasonable players on the international stage. They have proven that to us time and time again. Just like Putin did. Or maybe some people, they like to emulate Neville Chamberlain just a little too much for my comfort. Let's take a break. With what time we have left, we'll welcome the media ambassador, and of course, we'll open the phone line. Stay tuned.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want to keep.
Give us a call at 235-5479.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
As always, we appreciate you starting your day with us. Let's get into this morning's first conversation.
Is the country's healthcare system more at risk more than ever?
Why it has remained unaddressed for so long.
Political parties get lots of cash, big cash from financiers, and then when they get that now, you can't account for it.
But it's really the specialist nurses who we are in a greater shortfall for.
We can tap into the resources and have them, at least form some mentorship programs.
Highlight our food systems, and which will attract persons from all over the world to come and experience something that actually supports the local economy.
We're lucky that we have a vibrant legal system that allows change to take place, and it's not that matters are just swept under the carpet and discrimination is allowed to be perpetrated.
A lot of people don't know that there were attempts to ban the carnival, suppress the carnival.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
We're back on talking about WSN, the content capital. Joining me, of course, is our media ambassador. Unfortunately, I took too much time because I was quite annoyed at some of the commentary from some of the experts who generally spend most of their time mulling over international relations between Western democracies, who both want peace. You need to, at this point, you need to prove to me that Maduro is not on any sort of adventurism kick. But I'll say no more about that as we switch gears and welcome Acting ASP Christopher Arun.
Yeah.
Morning.
Good day, good day.
Of course, the conversation continues with regards to schoolers.
Yeah, and the school
soon coming to end. But there was a big incident with regards to school violence, and this is just one of those things now where it seems like the National PTA actually approves of the Prime Minister's stance on it. Even though technically you have to be careful with the labeling that you put on people,
Yeah,
until they're convicted of something, at least.
Yeah, well, especially with children. Good day to you and your viewers and your staff. Well, when it comes to children, there's a protocol in place. So there's under the new Children's Act, 12 of 2012, 4601 is the Parent Act. It speaks of how children should be treated. It speaks of how there are how new laws in terms of sexual penetration, sexual touching, cruelty, and whatnot. There's also something called the Judges' Rules for Children, which indicates how child suspects should be treated. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, there are no mandatory laws for arrest at all. So there's not mandatory. So if you commit a murder, the police don't have to arrest you. If you commit a rape, you don't have to arrest you.
This is in general?
This is in general.
Okay.
So there are no mandatory arrest laws in Trinidad, whereas in other jurisdictions, for instance, there are domestic violence cases where you have to arrest the perpetrator because it would lead to death or further violence. So we don't have mandatory arrest laws in Trinidad. So in the Acts of Trinidad and Tobago, it says that the police officer may arrest with or without a warrant, depending on the circumstance of the matter itself. So when a child is being dealt with by the police have the discretion on how to deal with the child. And furthermore, with the children's judge's rules, there are specific ways to have a child dealt with. In terms of ID parade, a child wouldn't be necessarily placed on an ID parade. They'll be placed before, there'll be something called a photo array, where photographs will be mixed with that of other children, and the victim, the alleged victim, will be allowed to give, to look at those pictures. The court itself...
To select out of the group.
Out of the group, if the child's picture may or may not be in the group of pictures. So that is just one. Then you have, when a child is arrested for any offense, if the child is arrested or even asked to come to the station, the child is entitled to legal counsel afforded by the state. So whereas the parent or guardian may be able to afford it, and whether they can or not, a call is made to what they call duty counsel and the legal aid, and they send an attorney across to represent that child almost immediately, or they make arrangements. So a police officer may not necessarily arrest a child immediately for an offense. One of the things that Ms. Guy Allen, my previous superintendent, and myself would have spoken about when we were both attached to the Special Victims Department, specifically the Child Protection Unit, is that there are a lot of offenses arising out of school violence. You have robberies, what they call extortion, taxing. You have that is demanding money by menace. Robbery, you actually have robberies where people come up to you and take your money and your food and whatever. That is robbery. You have larceny, you have assault, you have and whatnot. And we've always indicated that the best way to deal with this is through the courts, because we are seeing where the violence it doesn't stop.
I think in Southeast Port of Spain, some of the students were interviewed. And one of the students complained, oh, well, the conditions, they have us kept in classes during lunch and break, and, you know, just the environment is upsetting. But then one of the other students kind of went further and said, well, look, the real thing is you have these guys, they break the rules, they commit acts of violence, they fight, or girls, and nothing comes out of it. And nothing comes out of it because they get suspended for 2 days and then they come back. Even though the guidelines are supposed to be after so many suspensions, it's expulsion.
So, and so the courts, the Children's Court of Trinidad and Tobago, so there's one right off Traggery Road here next to the Oval. Right, so they specifically deal with how to treat with children, the rehabilitation of children, whatever offense it might be, murder, robbery, whatever.
Has it been like unofficial policy? We don't really want it to get there, because I feel as though
apparently yes, apparently that has been the policy of some schools, but we have been asking and pushing for parents and teachers to make reports to the police so that the police can treat with it and the police can take them before the Children's Court. And the Children's Court have a great way of dealing with it.
One of the things that I want to ask, because it's come up more than once, when teachers try to stop the fighting, at least in these cases, it seems as though the teacher, like, if there was a fight in my school when I was going to school and a teacher showed up, the fight done. Like, no one is so bold as to continue fighting for a teacher. But not now, right? So then there were at least 1 or 2 cases where the teacher tried to physically, like, block the blows. And it's, obviously that is a crime. But the question is, and I already said up front, so I already have my assumptions that they can't, but how far could the teacher go to physically stop the fights? Because if they were to fight back while being assaulted.
Of course, there are self-defense laws. When I say self-defense laws, only a court can determine if your actions warranted self-defense. So in itself, you have to be careful exactly how much force you use to stop the force being used against you. So yes, self-defense is there for the teacher. The teacher could use enough force to subdue the child to further commit any harm or danger to anybody else. So they could use enough force to subdue the child.
Is this one of those things where you kind of need a judge to rule on it to try to maybe kind of solidify what the expectations could be? Because I feel as though the teachers rightfully are saying, well, I'm not really sure what I could do in this situation. So at least in one case, Not this recent one I'm referencing, but a while ago where it was one female student being beat on by a group of students. A male teacher intervened, and I guess he decided, look, I'll just try to physically interpose myself and not fight back.
And so a police investigation will determine if, and that is the opinion of the police, if the teacher had used enough force or not, reasonable force or not. Right. And they may even, if they found that the teacher went above and beyond the reasonable force threshold, they could charge the teacher for assaulting the minor. And in this case, it would be cruelty because it's during school hours. Oh. And they have care and custody of the child.
What do you make about, I think it has come up before, but some people are saying, and I think this has come up in other jurisdictions for other reasons, perhaps parents should be liable for what their children do. And I'm not too sure how simple that is.
That's a difficult determination to make because, again, children act on their own. They behave a particular way on their own. And I've actually seen where you have great parenting at home, and then you have a different outcome with the child. So is it that the child now, there are some cases that the parents could be liable in terms of supervision, providing supervision, providing food, providing clothing, providing shelter and whatnot. Those things are different, but in terms of how the child behaves.
To prove bad parenting led to violent behavior is not so simple.
It's a bit difficult.
Because as you pointed out, you have good parents and the child might end up being a lawbreaker.
Yeah.
So then I guess it goes back to one of what one of the students said or implied. You could have a stable home, but if the school environment is not stable, if the expectations and accountability is not there, then the development, it's almost like if it's two parallel tracks. Where home it's fine, but in school it went off the rails, and now we have to ask the question, how do you fix it? Can it be fixed?
Yeah, I think the most important question is what actions the parent took after the incident. So there's an incident, what actions you took to stop the furtherance of this offense, this behavior.
Because that could potentially then, it brings back up the question of their liability,
Yeah, because the problem the teachers are facing is that they may or may not identify, or they might actually eventually identify the problem with the child as being violent or being disturbing the class and whatnot. And they point it out to the parent, and the parent does nothing. And that is one of the problems the teachers are having in schools.
It seems as though the NPTA is not looking to protect all students and all parents, and thus they're willing to say, look, you have to kind of remove some of the bad apples.
And the impression I got from in the recent conversations was that they want to make it mandatory to make that report. So when the teacher,
violence.
Yeah, exactly. So when the incident takes place, there's a mandatory reporting clause. So right now in Trinidad and Tobago, the laws only cater for mandatory reporting laws for sexual offenses.
Okay.
So you have a sexual offense. So if you see a murder, there's no mandatory reporting law for you to report it. Exactly. So if there's an assault, there's no mandatory reporting for me as sorry, not as a police officer, but as a citizen to make the report.
The reason why I say that's crazy is people might see a murder body, they don't want to be involved, so they don't want to report it.
Right.
Now, to some extent, if it was mandatory, it takes the choice out of your hands.
Exactly.
So then, now all of a sudden, at least at some point, the criminals will understand, look, technically speaking, we could threaten you, but then also the law is threatening you.
Right.
So it's not so simple. But since it's under your discretion, it changes the calculation. Even I myself, when we're like, I mean, ultimately, I would report it, but I won't feel secure about it.
No, that's different from a duty of care. I, as a police officer, have a duty of care. It is my duty to make a report. If you come to me and make any report, I must act.
But going back to, and don't necessarily want to go too deep into it, but it seemed as though there was an unofficial policy now wanting to have to report things for whatever reason, maybe to keep the kids in school, because I think initially there is an implication of, well, if we expel them and what have you, what's going to happen to their future?
Exactly. So there must be what we call secondary avenues for countermeasures for when children behave badly. Is it a behavioral change? Is it that they need counseling? Is it that they need remedial treatment? Is it that they need rehabilitation?
But I think we've reached the point now where, at least in some extreme cases, they need to be removed from those schools, because that's what one of the students said.
Yeah, but when you remove them, you can't just leave them alone.
That's the key. It's not to remove them from school and just
have them
out in the world.
Exactly. Because
the point is the situation is so out of control, at least to one of the students of Southeast Port of Spain. It's like, look, they're disrupting the rest of the school.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good way forward.
The Prime Minister did say, I think MyLat is one of the avenues where they might direct the
but
kids to go
it
to.
may not be necessary in every case. It's a discretionary measure, and it's up, and that's why the courts. You see, I don't think the courts have all the resources available to them. So a judge in good standing in the children's court or a master might want to utilize MyLat, and MyLat might not be available to that judge. So I'm not too sure what resources they have available except YTC, but if they could put things in place to provide resources to the judiciary to have the children placed elsewhere or placed in a particular position to be rehabilitated for remedial progress and whatnot, for treatment.
And the thing is, I think there was a report that I kind of skimmed over this morning. I wasn't really going to speak about it, but one of the things that I did note, I could be wrong, but the perpetrator may have been, a former graduate or a member of either the police youth club or one of these sorts of institutions like MyLat.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, like, these are not silver bullets that are surefire.
No, but it's a progressive way forward, because if we could handle the children at this stage when they misbehave and take them out of that system and put them in a rehabilitative situation, I think it will be progressive towards the entire country becoming a better place.
How important, because I mentioned it before, but how important is it to have stability?
Very important.
With regards to a child, not just stability in the sense of they have food, shelter, clothing, but also facility in the sense of we set rules and we are consistent with the rules, so the child understands what the expectations are.
Right.
Once they're reasonable expectations, right? It kind of helps condition them to have a reasonable mindset.
And you should have positive outcomes, yes.
But meanwhile, the actual topic with regards to school coming to a close.
But we just want to remind parents that you also have the responsibility to take care of children. Now, the children coming out of secondary school now are not necessarily 18 years. They're under 18 years.
Yeah.
They're still minors. And we have them going to parties, and we have them attending graduation ceremonies and prom, what we call prom now. And we must still ensure that they are properly supervised wherever they go. So they're going to the malls, they're going to clubs, they're going to wherever.
Well, part of it, they're going to shop.
They're going to shop.
Buy whatever they need.
Yeah, and they're going to have a party after, and they're going to get influenced to use drugs and alcohol and whatnot. And you have a responsibility to ensure that this doesn't happen. We want our children to return safely home.
Let's take the two ends of the conversation and meet them in the middle. We have a violence problem.
Right.
Not every student who might be a troublemaker is going to be expelled within the next couple of weeks, right? So potentially some of the troublemakers are going to be part of the students who's going on vacation.
Yeah.
There might be some of the students who's going to go to these dances, these parties.
Right.
And if they're robbing in school, and this is where maybe the parents, it comes to the parents to what are you doing when they're out of school, because if they're robbing in school, they want new shoes for the dance, they might look to rob. And this could be potentially, because they got away with it in school, they're not hardened criminals.
No.
But because they got away with it in school, they escalate.
It escalates. We've seen where, as a young officer in the task force, I remember going to a particular school in Port of Spain where the kids, the primary school kids, and they came from a culture of gang violence. And they were portrayed it in school, so the teachers called us in to speak to these young men.
Okay. They were just portraying it, okay.
Yeah, well, I never picked up on how far they went into the lifestyle again, but hopefully it would have been curtailed. I coincidentally, Southeast School, as a task force officer, Southeast School, we never got called to that school for any reason at all.
Really?
Even though that school is in the middle of some questionable location, there is a lot of, we did minimize the gang culture and the behavior and the crime that's going on around the school, because we were the task force officers in charge of the area. But the school itself, we never got called to the school for violence.
One thing that I wanted to ask and I forgot, when you have a case that involves violence in schools and the students might be arrested, you all still have to consult with the DPP to charge, I would imagine?
Of course, yeah. Well, I mean, it would be the best practice, but the Children's Act does cater for particular offences to charge a minor. For instance, like sexual penetration, if committed by a minor upon a minor, then we must consult the DPP. So there are particular cases that we would have to consult the DPP before we charge a child for any offense.
Now, back to end of school, I guess one of the things is, you know, yes, you could have good parents, but then now we have the subjective issue of bad parents. And in a situation like this, now you're off for potentially 2 months, maybe you're graduating. It's just one of those things where the system only has so much control over the development of students. The police only have so much oversight.
Yeah, exactly. So you as a parent need to take responsibility for how you manage your child following the end of school and whatnot. You know, there are a lot of entrepreneurship programs, a lot of self-taught in the institutions or stuff they could get themselves into. Yeah, they could teach themselves how to become a business person. They could start their own business. That's what I'm trying to say, is that parents will have to leave it to them to do their own thing. They can help them gather the information, execute the...
This is for the potential graduates, you know, what's the next step?
Yeah, don't have them lingering around doing nothing.
I mean, technically, GATE is still available, assuming that...
I'm not too sure.
It's still available, right? Assuming that the parents could still afford to feed and clothe, you know, generally speaking. It is one way, one avenue for students to try to, you know, work towards their future. But I guess, you know, part of it is, it's not even just the graduates. What about the Form 4 student that has to, you know, come back in September? And how that is being handled. Because even if the school was trying to do everything right, now at best the students are, and to some extent this is where parental supervision, if you kind of take it for granted, my boy is a good boy. And you don't necessarily know, he might have been a good boy last year and then he fell into a bad crowd this year, right? And now coming into this vacation, coming into the following year, like you said, like with children, they'll start small and then, you know, as boundaries are pushed, they'll escalate.
And then you have to be wary that at the age of 16, you're entitled to have a learner's permit in Trinidad. At the age of 17, you're entitled to have your driver's permit. So you have graduates who can drive vehicles and go out there and party and drink and...
Not saying that this was done by anybody I know, but, you know, graduation and rental cars maybe should remind parents that I believe legally people under the age of 25 can't drive a rental car.
No, I'm not too sure.
That was a law at one point.
Maybe there's an issue with the insurance.
Yeah, but the point is it's law, so I'm just saying, you know.
No. According to the law, you could drive at the age of 16 with a...
No, rental. This is a rental.
That might be an insurance issue.
Okay, all right. Because I'm just saying, you just be careful about that. Because I know, you know,
so it's up to the insurance company.
You need a car to drive around for your graduation.
Yeah, that might be a law. That might be a subjective issue between the insurance company or the company itself, the rental company, and the purchaser or the renter.
Well, let's just say, as someone whose family was involved in rentals, I'm pretty sure.
But maybe as contract.
It's not option. I don't think.
It might be a contractual.
No, but it's not limited to specific insurance, and it's, you know, it's like across the board.
Yeah,
there's no rental.
Yeah, I think that was I think that was.
Either way, then you don't have insurance.
Right, correct. Yeah.
So technically, that's.
Well, the thing is, if the police stop you and the vehicle have insurance and you have a valid driver's permit, we can't do it.
I am very certain, at least like with police in Tobago, if you're a minor, if not a minor, but if you're 17, 18, 19 driving a rental car, you could potentially maybe not get arrested, but get in trouble.
Maybe. It's not illegal.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I will stand corrected on that.
Yeah.
All right. We only have a little bit of time left, so we'll open the phone lines. You call, and obviously we already had a couple of comments on the whole Venezuelan situation. There were other things, airport security notwithstanding, police bullets notwithstanding. You missed that part. I was so deep into the show.
Okay.
But there were other things that happened, folks. You could call and have your say with regards to local politics that's going on. I don't think I'll ask you. I don't know if you should comment about the Venezuelan situation.
No, I have no comment.
You have no, exactly. So that is to remind people, don't expect the media ambassador to comment on certain things because it is improper for them to do so. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. This is one of those topics where I don't know if maybe people are worn out because it's hit the news cycle quite a bit over the entire weekend. And there was more that I could have said about it with regards to how I saw it and potentially I was being, I'll say it, maybe I was being a bit arrogant over it, but I just can't deal with the double standard that I saw that, you know, we have to always be careful, but the other side could always do whatever, and we need to somehow forgive it and understand it and label it as reasonable. But it is what it is. Now, I guess as we wait for callers, with regard to this time period, you mentioned the fact that, and I almost forgot this, but this might be outside of your purview, but there are programs in place to try to help parents. Like one of the things that I think is a modern phenomenon, because there's no more single income households, it's now the default has to be dual income if you want to have a middle class lifestyle. Income, yeah. School is like a default daycare.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That it's more important for some parents that they have school to go to so that the kids are not at home than to actually educate the kids.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So when they're on vacation now you run into a situation, now everybody economically could afford all of these various activities, camps, programs. Right? Now the police youth club, they tend to have stuff going on.
Programs, yeah.
And it's a bit more affordable than some of the other ventures.
Because at the transport branch where I work, we do provide transportation via buses for the police youth clubs to advance whatever program they have. So they might be going on field trips. It's a great initiative. Each one, to get up this Saturday, we had Malabar Youth Club, Police Youth Club, under the supervision and Inspector Michelle Lewis, using our vehicle to go on a field trip. I mean, they go to beaches like Blanchisseuse, and they go to rivers, and they go to hikes, and they go to communities. I remember as a young person when I was in the church, we used to go to communities and help elderly people clean up their house and their yard and whatnot. So, yeah. So they also do a lot of those.
I mean, to some extent, these kind of formative things, we kind of take it for granted. Yeah. But also, if it's just to go to a river, go to a beach, you might think, well, what's the point of that?
It's not a lime, you know. It's to go, might be to clean up the beach or the river.
Okay.
Yeah.
But even if it was, the point is,
it's a very strict. They're well supervised because they're not allowed to go and bathe and whatnot unless there's proper supervision.
But also it gets them out of potentially
harm,
and trouble, influences might be first of all, they might have bad influences at school, they might have bad influences wherever they reside.
And the youth club depends on stakeholder investment. So the community might invest by making donations to the club in terms of clothing and food and supplies and school supplies, and even contributing towards the venture themselves or the events. And so therefore it takes some strain off of the pockets of the parents.
Because I was in a similar situation where you're involved with kids, and the regular structure they have is very different to the one that the organization I was a part of provided to them, right?
Yeah.
So it was almost like if they didn't even necessarily care what we were about. It was just an alternative for them to go to where life would be a little less stressful.
Yeah.
Was something that subconsciously they might not understand it, but subconsciously they were begging for it almost.
Yeah. I think I think trying to be able to do well if they invest better or more into these programs.
In the long run,
yeah.
We have a call on WhatsApp. We'll take the call. Good morning, caller, on here.
Good morning, Sean.
Morning.
Good morning, SP Arun.
Good day.
I just wanted to tell you, Sean, that your 628-4578 number is down,
Oh.
It's been down since Friday, actually.
Okay.
I couldn't get on it Friday and as well this morning.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me say this, Sean. Let me quickly say, I listened to your discourse this morning about let me put it this way, that your pro-Western stance against Venezuela.
Okay, sure.
Let me say that personally, it's how you handle things. And although I understand, the Prime Minister basically sent a message to Venezuela. I agree with you. He sent a message to Venezuela saying, we ain't playing ball with all you. So she took a stance against Venezuela.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm bothered with is, previous to this, there was an incursion in Venezuela where something similar happened, and Maduro held some people, and he didn't initially display them. There were some social media videos that came out on it and stuff, and eventually those people, actually last year, before Biden lost election, Biden made a trade for those same people with some Venezuelans to get back those people that everybody said Maduro claimed that, and they didn't want to believe what Maduro said. But the U.S. government made a trade for those people to get them back. So you have to take what Maduro said. Don't just dismiss it. Let me just say that. You can't just dismiss it. Right?
I believe something happened.
Yes, but I'm saying we should actually go through our diplomatic channels to find out who is this so-called Trinidadian that they have. There are diplomatic channels that we can go through, and I hope we're going through that. I hope Mr. Soba is on that. Now, let me say this about Mrs. Prasad Bisesa's claim. What got me upset is Mr. Philip Alexander, who boldly made a claim on a statement on social media, basically saying that Venezuela can't do nothing because the U.S. have the Monroe Doctrine, and they're not going to, and not Venezuela can't do nothing because of that Monroe Doctrine. I was surprised of the stupidity of Mr. Alexander's statement. It's on social media. You could go and find it. Basically saying that U.S., they can't do us nothing because U.S. going to deal with them. And that is not the wagon you need to hitch. A country like ours need to hitch any wagon on. We are a sovereign state, and we 9 miles off of Venezuela. We need to play in our own pond and play carefully. That's what I have to say about that issue. Now, the airport, Sean.
Yeah.
It is, firstly, the airport authority has shown themselves incapable of securing the Piarco International Airport. And let me tell you why. Before this incident where they robbed the Peter Pits, and before the incident where they shot and killed the man outside the arrival, the arrival collection area there. There was an incident on the other side of the airport, which is secured, have gate. You can't just walk inside there, where they robbed a shipment of money going to Tobago for the banks inside the compound. So it tells me that the airport authority security mechanism is woefully inadequate. Therefore, I hope the Minister of, what's his name, Mr. Alexander?
Homeland Security.
Homeland Security now works with the security services and the airport authority with bringing some seriously meaningful security for that facility, because that is embarrassing. Those last two incidents are embarrassing to Trinidad and Tobago. And I could tell you, I have gone to the airport on the last 2 times I went to the airport recently. One was to drop my son was going to London, and the other one was to pick up a friend. And it seemed as if these airport authority security seem to be traffic wardens alone. And that should not be the case. The outside, so you will see them outside there standing, tell you not to, you can't park. Well, they allow you to drop off somebody. But meaningful security is what we need. Just as you see, the comment you had, but the person said there are 7 entrances or seven entrances, exits to the terminal building. Those have to be more secured, because now that people could just run in there and rob Peter Pits in the night.
We have an air guard in the back there.
Yeah, but the point is the robbers knew in the front they could get away.
We're talking about yes, Perry, we're talking about the actual the frontage where people go in and out of the terminal building.
Oh.
That is the issue here.
Yeah.
Right.
Because caller,
but even though it's open, it's isolated in the sense that you have to actually drive come up from the roundabout and come up to that facility. So there needs to be a presence there that would deter the thought of the actions that took place, that took place.
In the back of the air guard.
Yeah, of course, but that's too far in the back.
Yeah, maybe they should be in the front too.
Because the problem is to secure the airport. Think about it this way, caller. While it is their post, and I don't know to what extent they could leave their post, they robbed Peter Pit, let's just say Peter Pit, right? That is not too far from just past where the food court is. Right opposite that is the domestic departure lounge, where there is supposed to be security right there. And then there's supposed to be, if my memory serves correct, security by the international arrivals. So there's a part of me that's like, how do you get a gun into the airport to rob a fast food place, right? There's no inside.
There's a Peter Pit in?
Yes, yeah, like right next to Subway.
Yeah.
It's a counter. It's not like a room where you go into.
Yeah.
So potentially they have the gun right there, exposed for anybody to see. And it's not like at whatever hour that was, you expect there's going to be this rush of people where you can't. You know what I mean? So.
And we have police officers there too.
Well, apparently they did it in between patrols. Thank you, Mr. San Fernando, for that. I can't agree more. With regards to, I didn't address the Philip Alexander situation because I actually saw Gary Griffith's response to that, but I didn't actually see the actual comments. Yeah, I'll comment on that before the show is done. Don't worry about that. We have a caller on the line. Good morning, caller. You on there?
Good morning, Mr. Small, and good morning to the Honorable ASP Arun. Right, okay. I'm not at the TTPS this morning.
Right.
I'm giving all a break.
Thanks.
At the head of the central bank. The central bank guru has questions to answer. He has lots of questions. He has changed his external auditor. He has removed the Auditor General of Trinidad and Tobago and bring in his own choice. And I'm hope it's not the linkage with the stepdaughter whose mother is in a big auditor firm out now. If he has done that and he hasn't publicized it, why is he hiding it? Because if you go to the central bank website as of 15th December 2023, the external auditor of the central bank was Jayanti Ramdas. Why has he changed it? What he is telling us is he being secretive of so many things that I hope it has no nexus to the vice cartel and the money going out of the country at the foreign exchange. Yeah? That is one thing. The other thing that cements my argument, Mario Brown, a former PNM minister, this morning on another radio station, said he has problem with getting information from the central bank. And he brought in some evidence. He said he went to the Barbados central bank and he got information about their growth, which was 4%. Jamaica, similarly, minimal growth. Trinidad Central Bank on their webpage say not applicable. If we as a country needs to go forward, we need information in the economy, and it appears that is hiding it. I think we have to go by the Privy Council ruling, investigate him, and investigate the former Minister of Finance. The other quick one, if my neighbor is a drug trafficker as the American told us about Maduro. Why should I engage with him with any diplomacy? That is not right. And the PNM has twisted tongue because they use the American legal system to prosecute Ferguson. And now you want to say, and you're twisting and your narrative is all over the place. We have to be consistent that. And I am standing with my leader, my prime minister. No diplomacy. You attack quick, we go attack you with the little potong. I'll go and have a nice morning.
Thank you, caller. Quickly, I think, I don't know if there's any technicalities with regards to how the information was requested or what is the procedure or stuff. So if that's the case, well, that makes the whole debate a moot point. But just the fact that the Trinidad Bank governor doesn't want to reveal information, it's an independent body could tell the prime minister, no, you can't make decisions for us. That's fine. Requesting information is not that. Because now it makes you think, what do you have to hide? And one would argue it's reasonable that the duly elected representative of the country should have the capacity to ask for certain things, just to find out what's going on. Why is that such a thing? You know, the police are not supposed to take, you know, instructions on who to arrest from the prime minister. Doesn't mean the prime minister can ask, well, what's going on here? Just let me know now. I need to know.
I haven't heard from Shogunas in a while.
I know. Yeah, it's one of those things where
Shogunas,
just call and let us know if you're doing okay.
Yeah.
But we do have a call on WhatsApp. Who knows? Might be him. Might be him. Caller, good morning. You on the air?
Yeah, morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
With respect to the airport security, it is very simple. Definitely we need cameras with high definition, that's one. But the doors, you'll make the central door for entry into the airport the main door for anybody coming in at a particular time, and close all the other small doors, the Tobago side and the exit side. And you will have no need for a dozen policemen to be there at that point in time, because you have one entry, one exit. I will listen off there. Thank you.
All right, thank you, caller. I think at best you will need 7. You'll need 5, because the two ends of each building, the exits, you could probably have one post cover the two exits. One at the end, like the very end of the building, and then there's one not too far from the end. So I don't think you'll need 7. You might need at most 5.
What?
5 what? Basically guard posts. So you'll have 1 to 2 officers to kind of just keep track of.
They don't have like a response.
I'm not too sure what their security response plans were, because I mean the murder is one of those things where it'll be very difficult for any security in the building to respond to. But
they don't have an airport authority vehicle that would respond to.
Doesn't seem so. I've never seen it.
Because Piaco police station is not too far, and
yeah.
I mean, although they have limited and they have to supply a service to the entire community.
I mean, one of the simplest measures would be to have a security gate that you could close. So if you detect anything going on, you literally just block off the path of escape, and then you just deal with, you pick them up with whoever, however, whenever, right? Yeah. There are different ways to do it. I don't know if closing off all the exits would be a good idea. Part of it is the practicality of the traffic flow.
And then it might be a hazard for fire and whatnot.
Right, because when you have international flights, there's a tendency of it could be very busy all of a sudden with multiple flights, domestic and international, around the same time, around the same day. And then, so don't take it for granted that half the time the airport is empty. It's like we can't really think about it in those terms. Although, yes, maybe a couple of them could be closed. Like the 2 ones at the very end.
Yeah, but they would need supplemental police to station vehicles out there to respond.
I think part of it is the response plan. So being able to cut off any parts of escape.
But they should
having a car.
Because the compound
it's the parking lot as well, not
right, and so the security of that compound is guarded by airport authority. So they have the controlling security.
Because you have multiple car parks.
Yeah.
Then you have the food court outside to the end past the international arrivals. Then, of course, you have a parking lot of VIPs on the opposite end by the departure area where you have Carl starts off and then you have all the international counters, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the cars, you know, the
So the
flow of
question might
traffic.
be if they have adequate airports authority police and a response team. So they need to have all of that in place.
What capacity they have to respond to certain things is the question.
Yeah.
And as well as how much personnel you have on any given shift.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is not one of the areas where you want to be vulnerable because there's too much risk involved. And all you need is one wrong incident to spill over on the tarmac, and then all of a sudden insurance on airplanes and flight operations and all kind of things could be who knows what, depending on how crazy the individuals get. So it is what it is. Just the police patrolling, and to some extent, yes, potentially, if Piarco is right next door, they could be included in the response plan.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it should be, but the thing is the primary security of the airport
authority.
is the airport authority. So the police
do they have a powers of arrest like police?
Of course, yeah.
On the airport?
Yeah, all supplemental police.
Right, so they
all
would be supplemental police.
Yeah.
Right, and they're armed, right?
Of
this
course,
is not like port police. I find that's another thing.
And port police have the same authority as regular police officers.
Yeah, but usually I don't see them armed.
They are, yeah, I know.
They're supposed to be.
They are.
But I don't always see them.
Well, I've seen them armed.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, let me go back to the... I will say this. The minister did give a very decisive statement, Minister Alexander, and I agree with him. You need to show strength moving forward on this. This is not something, we hope that things come. No, this is something that he has to be decisive and he has to commit it. Now, with regards to Venezuela, the whole point about the Monroe Doctrine and how that was evolved in the Western Hemisphere, like, I get that, but that's not necessarily where I want to go. We have treaties with America. We are a Commonwealth nature, so it's not just America, it's also the UK. To some extent, look, we're not going to be able to afford Exocet anti-ship missiles and some Mirage 2000s to fly with them, right? We're not Argentina. We don't have the budget for certain things to deal with certain threats. It is what it is. So we do have to depend on a bigger brother, right? I think, as was alluded to, the fact that the Prime Minister said we will use deadly force, what makes that the wrong statement really, to me, comes to the fact that if anybody does defense analysis of Trinidad and Tobago, as Guy Griffith pointed out, we do not have the capacity to inflict deadly force against a better armed opponent. It is what it is, right? It's an empty threat. So to some extent, as Mr. Simon said, I understand what the Prime Minister is trying to do. I agree with the principle of it. But one could even argue the outright threat of deadly force actually undermines her whole argument, because then it's like, what force you're going to use? And then it kind of takes the threat, makes it difficult to be seen seriously, even though everybody is responding about how incendiary it is. It actually is kind of silly when you think about it. It's not like the TTPS is going to go out there in the water and shoot with their rifles when, as Guy Griffith pointed out, we have 75mm guns firing back. Even the Coast Guard's largest caliber gun, which I thought at one point might have been our Bofors 40mm, would not be the same thing with regards to range and firepower as a 75mm deck gun. And the fact that that's all it takes to basically humble our entire defense force is kind of sad, but it is what it is, right? Here's the thing. We need to understand something. As Indira Rampersad pointed out, this is not rocket science. We know that to some extent, who supplies Venezuelan arms? Now we have to question, to what degree are they being supported by Russia and China, right? Politically, militarily, economically, etc., etc. To what degree is the adventurism that Russia has undertaken and China is reported and expected to undertake with Taiwan potentially is in the back of the mind of Nicolas Maduro, who is not the brightest strategic tool in the shed. And he's thinking, I could get away with this, right? Now the thing is, yes, I understand that there was another incident. I'm not saying that it wasn't an incident. I even said it could be a CIA thing. It could be. I have no idea. It could have been some bleeding heart activists in America that the American government decided to try to get back. And they wanted to do it hush-hush because not all people on the left-hand side of politics want to admit that the Maduro regime is what it is, right? So we don't know who it was that they negotiated for. America has negotiated for reporters before. Not just spies, not just military people. They could have very well have been spies. They could have very well have been military people. Was it a plot to overthrow the Venezuelan government. I don't know if I'll go that far, and all of that, because again, the statements of the Venezuelan government, if left unchallenged, potentially sets us up to be labeled by them and their allies as a state that produced terrorists. That's how the politics goes. That's not the thing that we already have a whole controversial thing about nationals in Syria, right? That already the past administration was very, very scared about bringing back home because of the implications of how we're going to look. I understand that. I understand a lot of the callers. That mattered to you all. I get it. As much as you all disagree with me, I disagree with you all. That mattered to you all. And that's the reality. So this is a similar thing. Because it doesn't take long. Adventurism only needs an excuse. And that's the reality. To show weakness, potentially, to a bully is a very good way to ensure that you're bullied. Because bullies or robbers or people that do home invasions, they don't necessarily just look for the fattest paycheck. They look at the weakest link, the ones they will get away with. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, correct.
On street level crime?
Yeah.
If you are a pedestrian walking down the street and you look like you're not to be messed with, they'll go to the guy who looks like he can be messed with.
Crime of opportunity.
There you go. Yeah. So it's a lot more complicated, I think, than the straightforward diplomacy. Let me not involve the TTBS media bastard anymore in the talk. Thanks to the callers for calling, and of course to the commentators who gave their comments earlier. This is Talking About WESN. Thanks, of course, to Acting ASP Arun for joining me once again.
Thanks, Evan.
And please take the TTBS's advice, because I'll say this, it's not like they're prophets, but when they warn us about something, bad things tend to happen to those that disregard it. I'm just saying, of their own violation, right? So please don't fall into some of the traps that they're pointing out not to fall into, and be mindful about your kid and have a bit more active role in guiding them during the vacation that's coming up when they're out of school, so you can't just leave it to the teachers and say they did a bad job. With that said, have a good day, stay safe, remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other, and never forget, it's nice to be nice even if we disagree, so we can see each other tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Low energy? Heart concerns? Migraines slowing you down? It's time to take control of your health. Join Wellness Unlocked, the series that brings expert advice and real solutions for a healthier you. In our latest episode, learn how Jameson CoQ10 can help support heart health, boost energy, and even reduce migraines. Get the science, the stories, and the steps to power up your health with CoQ10. Don't miss Wellness Unlocked. Watch now on WESN and start your wellness journey today.
I am Dr. Delphina Ovid, your friendly neighborhood dentist. At Community Hospital Dental Clinic, we offer examinations which include x-rays, basic oral cancer screening, and a treatment plan. We also offer cleanings, fillings, extractions, root canal treatment, and complete and partial dentures. Remember, you don't have to brush and floss all your teeth, just the ones you want.